back, everyone, to day 2 of Errors and Omissions Risk Management Session 2. We did a lot of conversing regarding all kinds of topics yesterday relative to E&O, had some special guest speakers. Today, we have lined up for you, Karush is going to start off by talking about wire fraud and cybersecurity, and then he will introduce Annie Neal. She'll go into our cybersecurity policy, and as a lot of you know, cybersecurity and wire fraud is a very real thing. We've had some pretty significant issues happen in past years that we want to make sure everyone is aware of. Then escrow funds disbursement. We'll talk a little bit about that, what the process is, how to handle issues. Then we have the pleasure of having our legal counsel, Daniel Peterson from Parker Poe, talk to us about the top 5 complaints he's seen in litigations. He is our counsel and has worked with us in Waynesville, Wilmington, Charlotte, even in South Carolina matters. So if you have an issue, he's likely the guy that is going to work with you and work with us to get it resolved. He's very good at what he does, thank goodness. Also, we are going to have using negotiations to diffuse tense situations so you don't end up in a situation where you have an E&O complaint or an issue that you have to resolve later. And then we will follow up by talking about the proper way to file an E&O matter. What do you need to do if someone all of a sudden reaches out, and what is an E&O matter and how do we address it? And who do we work with, and getting you on board there. Then we'll have some reminders and some follow-ups and talking through a few key points from just the conversations we've had over the last 2 days. Haley, is there anything else that I did not add yet?
No, it looks like you covered everything on the agenda. And Karush is here now.
Perfect. Welcome, Karush.
Good afternoon, everyone. So 1 second, let me see if I can share my screen. I have a few slides to share with everyone. Okay. Tiffany, can you see my slide?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about cybersecurity and wire fraud. That doesn't mean that I am an expert in this topic, but wanted to share with you what we have learned over the years. This is not a new topic. You guys have heard about cybersecurity, cyber theft, wire fraud. This is something we've been dealing with for years, especially as realtors, because we have increasing number of cyber fraud cases in the real estate business. I'm sure you've seen articles, you've heard enough about it. It's on your forms and disclosures. But the few things that we wanted to bring up, use this opportunity to educate everyone, just highlight some of the important facts and go over that with everybody. So again, I want to make a disclaimer that I am not an expert, and RE/MAX executive is not an expert in this field of business. There are plenty of companies out there. If you are interested to get additional information, we'll share the resources with you, but this is kind of housekeeping items and go over things and what we are experiencing as the brokerage here. So as you can imagine, with more people working remotely, working basically online, working from their homes, from insecure networks, we have increased activity in the cyber fraud and cybersecurity. FBI reported in 2020 over 790,000 complaints, over $4.2 billion of funds lost. So I also found an article that there will be about $6 trillion is expected to spend globally on cybersecurity, making sure that they can stop that. A lot of you have heard about the situation, the gas stations and the distribution centers that they ran into a while back, and this is something it's going to continue, unfortunately, until we can have a more secure network in all businesses. So it can impact retailers, grocery store, gas companies. It can happen to attorneys, financial institutions. So no one is completely immune. But what are the common types of cybercrime? The DDoS. I don't want to get too technical on any of these terms. This is basically where they have bots in the system. They overload the system. So again, you've heard from several companies have been the target, and the sites go down. You cannot access your profile, or you cannot access your documents. Identity theft is very common. It's nothing new. Phishing emails, those are mostly emails that they send attachments or links that they click, and then basically they take over your identity and they can get involved in criminal activities. Exploit kits, this is something more common in software. So where you use softwares and applications, specifically applications, I want to talk about that because a lot of us, we tend to download apps quicker than ever. As soon as we find out about a new application, oh, let's click on it and let's just get this new app and use it on our phone. And if you don't have enough information, a lot of these applications out there, they have basically gaps as far as security. And that's where these criminals can actually install these bots in the system, and they act like computers and they take over and start getting your information. So there's a lot of that happening. Account hacking. RE/MAX executive agents have received a lot of emails in the past year or two from specifically our leadership team, from Tiffany, myself, from Hadi. You guys have seen those spam emails asking for money, asking for gift cards, and it's as long as you have information that's online on any public portal, you're going to run into some of those problems. Unfortunately, we just have to be aware. And the bigger problem right now is the ransomware. So you hear a lot about that. NAR, they had a really interesting webinar, and there are videos on NAR website available for you to watch, short videos, 2 or 3 of them. It's good information to see. But on that topic, I want to encourage everybody. If you guys are keeping records on your computer, if you have emails, I know some of you want to keep emails forever. Understand that those activities, ransomware activities, have increased significantly since COVID. And you may run into a situation that you no longer have access to your files unless you make a payment. And if giant companies like gas stations and distributors are not immune, certainly we can be a victim. And a lot of the cases, unfortunately, the only way to get your files back is to make a payment. So highly encourage everyone to back up your information, your files, information, documents, emails. Try to regularly back up everything you have. Some interesting facts that I just wanted to share with you, just to see what is happening in the cyber world. The global average cost of the data breach last year in the United States was $3.9 million. And now this is mostly for small businesses. Most of these cyber criminals are targeting small business companies that they have weaker systems as far as security. 95% of all cybersecurity breaches were caused because of human error. So there was a red flag that we missed it, we didn't pay attention, somebody clicked on the link that they shouldn't have, they installed something they shouldn't have. So again, there are ways to prevent it, but human error is definitely playing a big part. Top malicious email attachments topics are documents, DOC. So if you see an attachment that is in a DOC format or DOT, pay attention to that. 37% of them, and then also the exe files, the exe files that you see an attachment has those words after the file name. So pay attention to that. The other interesting fact that I found online was that the identity breach, the average time to identify that breach in 2020 was 207 days. That's a long time. So if for somebody to not realize that they've been a victim for 200 days, and there's probably not much you can do once you find out about it. There's a lot of mess to clean up. So what can you do? There's several programs out there, several companies that they provide identity shield. Very expensive. You can probably get them as low as $29, $30 a month, depending on the plan. But you can put a credit freeze, in place with the bureaus to make sure no one is using your Social Security. But look into ways. I mean, that was alarming to me to see that most people in this country did not realize they were a victim after 200 days after the incident. Personal data was involved in 58% of the breaches in 2020. So they're not just targeting businesses, they're targeting individuals. 64% of Americans have never checked to see if they were affected by a data breach. If you happen to sign up for, one of these cybersecurity companies, the protection that is available, there's so many of them. I don't want to endorse anyone, but there are ways that they tell you if there was a major breach with any of the big hotels, retailers, credit card companies, and your name is on that list, you can actually see that they have the list of all the people that they were impacted. So once you sign up for one of those programs, they will let you know if your email address, your phone number, or your name popped up on one of those dark web sites or one of the listed that were compromised. Just to put a couple of them so you know that it's not necessarily just retailers that you use every day. I mean, but it could be as easy as like your membership to loyalty programs like Marriott. Last year, Marriott disclosed that there was a data breach and about 5.2 million hotel guests, they were impacted by that breach. MGM Casino in Vegas had a breach and they leaked information for about 142 million people. This is, all the guests that they had in the past 10 to 12 years. And their information was basically sold on the dark web. Again, interesting data, eye-opening to see what is happening there. We talked about the ransom payments. The average payment in 2020 was around $112,000. So they're not asking for $1,000, $2,000. I mean, they're asking for large checks to release your personal data. And the last one is just to show that a lot of people that were victims of these cyber security crimes during COVID with stimulus, with spam emails and fraud stimulus checks, about $97 million of funds were lost just due to that. And interesting, Zoom, the platform we're using today, they also got compromised and they had many users' information that they were available online. Now they've fixed that issue, but they had millions of users out there and their information was sold on the dark webs back in April of 2020, just when the platform started being used more frequently. So definitely some data to pay attention. Go to the next slide. Here, I want to show you what has happened in the past few years. So you can see the activity, how much it has increased, especially in last year when COVID happened and people started using more online applications, working from home. So you can see the green bars, they're basically number of complaints, and at the bottom, the blue is the actual dollar amount. So from 2019, there were a total of 467,000 complaints, and it jumped to almost 800,000 in 2020, almost doubled. And from the amount from 3.5 billion to 4.2 billion. Okay, so a little bit more about the ransom. Again, this is something I want to get your attention, because I know a lot of you guys are doing a good job with your record keeping. I mean, you want to make sure that you have copies of all email communications, unaccepted offer, things that the commission always reminds us we have to do a better job in our record keeping and keep text messages, evidence of everything we have. While that's really important in the business, you got to make sure that you keep them safe. There are several options for you. You can use online platforms, where you can host all your information on a shared platform like Citrix or ShareFile. Or you can use an external hard drive. But again, my recommendation is consider backing up your information. If you can't do it monthly, at least quarterly. Make sure that you back up all your valuable information, all your data, all your paperwork, because you could be a victim of one of these cyber activities. Ransomware is something that is happening everywhere for every level of user, from people that are actually using computer games, using Microsoft Office. It's widespread. It's growing as fast as you can imagine. So that's, again, a reminder to make sure that you copy all your information so you don't lose your data. You don't have to make a payment. Let's go to the next page. But what happens when you are facing one of these situations, or your clients? If you hear a client was a victim of a cyber breach or criminal activity, criminal activity, what do you do? Well, FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, they have a specific department handling these cyber activities and cybercrime activities. And so I have the website on this slide, but Haley, if you can put that in the chat box as ic3.gov. This is where you can find some information, really useful information. but also you can file a complaint on this platform. So I've got on a different slide, I have the 3 steps that when you have one of these situations, what are the things you should do? I'll get to that, but great resource. I encourage everybody to take a look at this website. They're pretty quick in getting back. So as soon as you file the complaint, you should get an email confirmation and they get in touch with you within 24 hours. That's the, I mean, unfortunately, they don't have 24/7 customer service that you file something on Sunday and they call you back, but they're pretty quick as far as monitoring this email. Okay, so with all the scary stuff we're talking about, what are the, I guess, the best practices for real estate agents, a cybersecurity checklist? I came up with some, but there's more. These are the important ones to highlight. Obviously, you probably heard Jason Atry, our CTO, talked about this in our last company meeting. Never click on unknown attachments or links. If you get an attachment, whether it's by in your phone, a text message, or on your email, do not click on it. Click on it. Do not open it, because majority of these cyber attacks are happening through these phishing emails that they're sending out. Use encrypted emails and transaction management platform or document sharing platform. There's so many of them. We use as a company for our backend office, we use Citrix. It's and they have basically a share file is their product. We can give access to different staff members. There's different security levels. They have redundancy. They copy this information on multiple servers. So if one server gets compromised, the information is there. We can retrieve the information from the West Coast server or the East Coast server. So that's one of the options, but they're a little bit more expensive probably for individual use. There's so many other platforms you can find, and there's some that you can find on NAR website. I talked to Tiffany this morning about these encrypted emails, and we're going to put together a list of vendors that we can recommend. We just need a little bit more time to do our investigation to make sure we share with you the right information, but we'll definitely share some platforms as suggestions. Be careful about your login and access credentials. Do not use simple, easy to guess, your first pet, your first car, or things that people can find on your social media. Use complicated passwords and try to change your password as frequent as possible. Keep your antivirus software updated. Make sure you have one for your phone as well. Just having the antivirus on your computer alone is not going to protect you. Unfortunately, again, with the activity, with the cyber activity increasing, there's a lot of attacks happening on your mobile phones through your applications, emails, and text messages. So you got to make sure you also have it on your smart device. And a lot of these companies that you buy the antivirus, you can actually pay to get the mobile version of that and download it on your smartphone. Do not download apps without verifying that they're legitimate and they won't install malware or breach privacy. So pay attention. Do a little research before you download the app. If you're just taking some pictures on board and you're looking some apps to be creative on your phone, just make sure that you read more information about that app. Make sure you Google their information about the malware, their privacy policy. It has to be a little bit more selective. Unfortunately, these I can't tell you that no company is completely immune from these attacks, but we have to be a little bit more selective. And of course, again, for the third time, don't click on unknown links from any senders that you don't know, whether it's a text or email. I want to ask Tiffany if she doesn't mind to share with you what platform she's using, because a lot of us that are using this, I guess, encrypted email platform, we had to learn, unfortunately, the hard way. And she has a story to share with you guys, and we were just talking about different platforms, and the one that she's using seems to be inexpensive and pretty effective. So Tiffany, if you don't mind sharing with the group.
Sure. So probably 4 to 5 years ago now, when I owned my own small firm, we caught within probably a minute or two twice within a day wire instructions that had gone out incorrectly. The horror that we all don't want to hear, an agent saying, I don't know what happened, but thank God they called me from the bank because it wasn't the right wire instructions. And when we looked into it, someone had hacked into our company email and was forwarding all of the messages from that agent to themselves and then acting as the attorney and making it look identical to the attorney, and a message going out and a message coming from my agent as well. And so at that time, I started looking for the safest way to protect my personal email and protect agents I was working with. And I came up with AppRiver. It cost me $60 to $80 a month seats on it, so it'd be much less for you, and we'll send you out different options and ideas. But I started using that because it was a way to safely secure my information. And also there's an encrypted feature. So if you are sending something that you don't want anyone to be able to see, you have an encryption function with AppRiver. You can also, if you're using a Gmail or some other type of utilization of systems, make sure you do that two-part authentication. I know it's a pain, and sometimes if people are helping you do things, you're constantly having to send a code or share something, but it's well worth it. You want to imagine how many times I see someone trying to get another code from me that is irrelevant or not current. So just be careful when you're out there. It does happen. Since I've been here, I've seen agents who've had similar situations happen. So if you're thinking it can never happen to you, you can't be safe enough. It's called AppRiver, AppRiver. And I'll share it in the link, and I'll give you guys some more information as well as some other resources that might not be the right one for you, but it's the one that I found that I trust.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Tiffany, what's the cost of AppRiver a month?
I have a couple of things that I do with it. I have the encryption, and then I have the security, and it's a total of $80 a month, but I have 18 emails that are tied to it. So if you only have one or two, it's going to be much less because it's per user.
Great, thank you. Again, we will send a follow-up email with some recommendations as far as the different platforms. But there's so many of them. Again, this has been an ongoing issue. So there's so many different platforms. The company that provides your email and they host your email account, the chances are they can have that product available. So it will be a seamless transaction. And basically, you can integrate that secure platform, encrypted platform through your email provider. I mean, you guys are using Gmail account. If you're not using an enterprise email platform, then you want to look into something like what Tiffany recommended. So we'll put that together. The next topic we want to talk about is wire fraud. This is a big deal, even bigger than the ransom and the cyber security that we were talking. This is probably the biggest topic in our business, because real estate activities, real estate transactions, they're in the top 10 as far as where these the fraud is happening and wire fraud is happening. So of course we're not the only business. Banks are being attacked, and real estate attorneys, escrow companies, title companies are being targeted. But of course we're also involved in the wire fraud. So quick stats on that. The highest reported fraud in the real estate in 2020 was email account compromise. So just keep in mind, these wire fraud activities, they all start with a really basic compromised email. It's not necessarily criminals getting access to your bank account and initiating a wire transfer from your client's account or from someone's account. It's as basic as compromised emails, sending wrong information, and the money is gone. The real estate wire fraud continues to be one of the most prevalent cyber crimes in the United States. So about 13,000 people were victims of the fraud just in 2020, which is 17% increase compared to last year. So these are real numbers out there. A lot of customers were impacted by this. In our group, RE/MAX Executive, we had 2 wire fraud cases last year and one this year. The good news is that we were able to track the funds with the case that we had this year, but this is happening a lot more frequent than you guys think. And there are so many ways that these criminals, they can get in touch with your clients. They don't necessarily have to basically find a breach in our system. If your clients, if the seller and the buyer, if they're using unsecure platforms, if they're using email addresses that like Yahoo accounts, AOL or Gmail that is not secure, and their data and their information is compromised, well, they can use that information and find their communications with the agent and the attorney office. So it's not just one source. It's not always initiated from the attorney office or the agent. That's why we see an increased number of these cases when it comes to fraud, wire fraud. So what do we recommend? The tips for you guys. We are the professionals. As you know, our state forms, they have disclosure language now about the wire fraud. It's something that is on the agency, is on the offer, and we try to basically have it in multiple places during the negotiations and the contract process to make sure the consumer is protected. But I want to share with you, being involved with at least 5 investigations for wire fraud cases in our company, I want to get your attention that just the fact that these disclosures are on your form, state forms, are not enough. They are not enough. They want to know what you have done as the professional, because the consumers, the buyers and sellers, they don't do enough transactions. Their transaction experience is sporadic. They don't do these type of transactions every year. They're not keeping up with the education. So your licensing body, whether you're a real estate agent in South Carolina or North Carolina, the licensing bodies, they hold you to a higher standard with all the education. And if you happen to have a civil case and you're basically in court, they also ask you, what have you done to educate the consumer, since you are the professional and you are privy to this information more than the consumer. So warn early and often. What I recommend is every single time you sign an agency agreement with a client, whether you're getting ready to list their house or you're getting ready to work with them as a buyer, you sign the agency, this disclosure is there. Take a few minutes. It doesn't take more than maybe 5 minutes to talk about it. To say, I'm really excited to start working with you and helping you to find your house. I'm really excited to get your house on the market. But before we do anything, I want to take your attention for a few minutes and talk about wire fraud. It is important. Try to document it. If you find brochures, if you find information, try to get them to sign that they received it. The more you can do upfront to protect yourself, the better chance you have to cover yourself when you're involved in a wire fraud situation. Because once we have a case, everybody will be investigated, and FBI is going to get to the bottom of this. They're going to check on your emails, and they want to see how you handle everything. If your emails are not secure, and so if you basically you're negligent in your communications and handling the client information and confidential information, you have a case. You can potentially lose your license, and it could be a real case against you. And we'll have Annie Neal, our broker, to talk a little bit about the coverage that is available. We do have cyber breach policy, but these coverages, they have a lot of exclusions. I want to talk about that. Okay, next item. So we talk about educate your clients about potential cyber threats online. Remind your clients that you will not send changes to wire instructions or payment information. Talk to them about that. Whether it's a seller, they want to get a payoff, or a buyer that need to bring in money, make sure you have this conversation with them that, hey, listen, you will never, throughout this process, as I just talked about the threats and what's happening in our industry, I will never send you wire instructions or ask you to change anything by email. So if you see that, it's a red flag. Ask your client to call to confirm all wiring instructions. So even when they get the wiring instructions from the attorney, tell them that it's best for them to pick up the phone and call the attorney office to verify that. Most attorney offices, they use secure platforms to send that information, but still, this is highly recommended. Make sure they pick up the phone and call and verify that. Use secure and encrypted emails. Again, just repeating what's important. Ask the closing attorney about their wire safety protocols. So this is something that I wish we had Ali McCormick on the call. Ali, with executive title, one of the things that we do when we add an attorney to our approved list, we ask them about their fraud policy, about the wire fraud policy. We ask them about their process. We want to make sure that when they're sending this information to the clients, our clients, it's going out with a secure platform. And we want to know what kind of disclosure is available on their behalf, because we can do our part. But if the attorney, real estate attorneys out there, in their communications, they're not reminding the clients about that, and they're not handling it the way they should, well, they're exposing your clients. So that's another reason that we recommend everyone to use our approved attorneys, because they've been vetted. We know, we're aware about their process. We know that the certain disclosures are there. But again, this is something that I recommend you as brokers to check. Have that conversation. If you're recommending a buyer to use a specific attorney, take a few minutes to find out about their wire safety policy. Do not send financial and confidential information via email or text, period. And the last thing I recommend is to use email signature disclosure. NAR has this template. We'll share that with you, but this is on NAR website. They came up with this about 2 years ago, I think 2018, that all Realtor members can use at the bottom of their email signature. So we'll share that with you. Just another reminder for your clients that they understand that this is a serious problem. We're not going to send you wire instructions. Always verify, always make a phone call to stay safe. We talked about
Hey, Karush.
yes.
George had a quick question. Is executive title able to receive earnest money deposits?
No, executive title is not an escrow agent, and executive title. So in North Carolina and South Carolina, real estate offices can handle escrow money or real estate attorneys. So unfortunately, title companies in these two states, because we do business a little different. So in some other states like Florida, settlement companies, they handle all that. In our markets, the escrow agent should be an attorney or a real estate broker. So we have to basically send the funds to the escrow agent. So I hope I answered that question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so spotting and preventing basically this spam emails and spoofing. So this is something, I just put 2 examples in there. This actually happened to one of our wire fraud cases. It was a situation where the criminals, they changed the domain name of the mortgage company. And the new email address was very close to the original. And so in this sample, you can see that it says smith.joe at your, instead of company, is company is basically is double N, and it looks like from a distance, it looks like M. So this is something that I wanted to bring to your attention. When you get emails from paralegals and something doesn't add up, it has languages like updated account or additional, or I'm out of the office. The place you want to check first is their email address, and make sure that you compare this with the other communications you have. You can pick up the phone if you're not sure about it, but do not respond to the emails right away if something looks fishy. This is happening, guys. In our case, there was email communication between somebody that claimed to be an employee of Bank of America, but it was Bank of America. So they changed that, and when you're just looking at these emails quickly on your phone, on your computer, you don't pay attention. So unfortunately, that's how they were able to hijack that email communication and start communicating with that client. So pay attention to that. There's a lot of it. We do have a policy for our brokers, but again, the policy does not cover you if there was no breach in our system. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more. A lot of the cases, go back, a lot of the wire cases, as long as it's discovered within 24 hours, there's a chance to get the money back. But if you wait, 10 days, that money is probably gone at that point. What do we do? So this is something that I'm sharing with you. You should also share with your clients. Part of that education. If you're a victim of wire fraud, immediately call your bank and ask them to issue a recall notice on that wire. Before I introduce again Annie to talk about the coverage, I want to share with you that RE/MAX Executive, we're one of the first companies that in our region we got the cyber fraud policy. We've had this policy for years in place. A lot of brokers, they recently look into adopting and getting a coverage as we see more of these activities. We've had it for years, but unfortunately, as I explained earlier, these policies that they're not inclusive of all types of claims. There are a lot of exclusivity exceptions and a lot of exemptions basically with these policies. So just the fact that you have a cybersecurity policy doesn't mean that every time there's a wire fraud, you're protected. It's got to be, in most cases, when a fraud happens, when wire fraud is there, the FBI is going to start an investigation. And before insurance companies, they decide whether they want to pay or it's a covered claim or not, they need to engage forensic attorneys, which is costly. So there's cost to engage the forensic group, and also they have to make sure that it is a breach that happened from our end, meaning that it was RE/MAX Executive or RE/MAX Executive staff. And at that point, if there was a breach or cyber security issue with our networks, then they will cover and they pay for litigation. They will pay for the actual claims and the actual loss. But until it is proven that it was a breach in our network, they don't come out right and write a check. So I want Annie to kind of explain that to make sure you guys understand what type of coverage is available. Annie, are you on the call?
I am. Can you hear me?
You've got the ground. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Well, I actually kind of was going to go through a lot of stuff that you went through already, Karusha. And so let me just do a little quick recap. I wanted to give you guys a couple things that Karusha touched on and just kind of give you a little more on the ransomware that he talked about before. I found this very interesting, but there are actually tech companies now that are making software programs to infiltrate systems. So these software programs are actually being sold on the dark web, and they're treating it just like a business. And so like, the big pipeline one, everyone freaked out and it cost millions of dollars and they're asking for money in Bitcoin. That's a small portion of it. Those cyber criminals that are creating the software, they actually apologized because they were like, oh, that wasn't our intended use. We'll do a better job of screening our clients. So, I mean, they're really treating this as a business, and for them, they want the business to be profitable. So the whole goal is infiltrate, get the ransom, have it paid, and then everyone's happy. And it seems crazy, but that's literally how it's working. And the average monthly payment right now is $100,000 per month in ransomware claims. The other thing, I mean, Karusha, like I said, he touched on a whole lot of stuff. I wanted to go over a few things. A big place where realtors do put themselves in jeopardy is using public Wi-Fi. So I would refrain as much as possible for jumping onto hotspots and any kind of public Wi-Fi, because you're really exposing yourself. And we don't think about how often we do that. So key thing there. Another thing I wanted to touch on is Karusha had mentioned steps to kind of protect yourself. That was a big one that I wanted to talk about. And it kind of translates over from, it's like a bridge from E&O to cyber, and it's going to protect you really well in both. My thought was, when you're taking a listing, when you start working with a buyer, whatever the case may be, as you sit down and take that 5 to 10 minutes and actually explain the entire process, not just the wire issue, but the entire process of how this transaction goes, because a lot of people don't know. And that's kind of one of the things that we see a lot is people will say, well, I didn't know there was any cyber issues going on. I didn't know people were succumbing to wire fraud. Well, I mean, you're living under a rock if you don't know, but that's what they're going to say. So if you go through and have a conversation and point out how the whole transaction works, and then from there, give them guidance, talk about the wire fraud. And then my suggestion is to follow up with a email that goes through and says, here's kind of what our conversation was. And
it's beautiful.
Annie, I think
Sorry,
you
so-
muted yourself.
I don't know how, I didn't even touch it, sorry. Okay, so if you go through all these steps with someone and then you can say, send an email that asks them for a response, that you've gone through kind of reiterating everything you've talked to them about, how the process works, about being cautious on wire fraud, get them to respond to a question so that you have in writing that you've given this to them. That's a really good way to have it shown that you gave it to them, show that you already talked about it, and putting it in writing and getting them to respond to it in writing. You've got that for a backup. But also reiterate to them that any wire instructions, don't call the number on the email. Make sure you call the actual office number that you found online or whatever. And again, I said this yesterday, make sure you're recommending multiple companies for these things, because that can get you into trouble when you're only offering one place to go for title or mortgage or inspectors or whatever it is. Because, one of the big things we saw, remember the Target breach, that was from an HVAC company that had come in and done some work. And that's how they infiltrated. So they can come in any way. There's a little library in some rural part of the country that was cyber hacked, and they came in and took everything. So Karush had kind of gone through the process of how it works once you have a claim, and they start with the forensic testings and things of that nature. If you have a client that receives an email and they say, oh, I noticed that the email address was wrong, but I still wired the money, it's not going to be covered. So it's a great idea if you can kind of get that information and find it, make sure that if they say that. We actually had a claim just this last spring where my client had the breach and they started the forensic process. And during that time, the buyer actually admitted that they recognized that this email was different from any other emails they'd ever received from that company, but yet they still sent the money. And so once they've done that, there's no way that they can turn around and sue you, because they've already admitted that they knew it was a different email address. So it puts the onus on them to take care of it. The problem with the cyber is that it's really fluid, because these criminals are constantly evolving and constantly changing their tactics. The coverage is as well. So the coverage is kind of left a little more broad to be able to adapt to things. But you have to be doing your job, and your clients have to be diligent in their end as well. And I know it's hard to say, because it's just like E&O. You're going to get the claim because they got to blame somebody. But oftentimes the breach isn't even on the realtor side. It's on a buyer's side, or a mortgage company side, or a title company side, or the attorney's office side. But as the realtor, you're always the first person that they kind of look at and they say, it's your fault. And a lot of that is because as realtors, we put ourselves out there. You want to be seen. You want people to know your name. You want them to know your phone number. But in doing that, we're also exposing, ourselves to being attacked and to having those things. It's hard to kind of go through and tell you exactly what's covered and what isn't, because of the constantly changing factors to the coverage and to the crimes. But essentially, if you have something that happens, like Karush said, the first thing you need to do is get it reported. And there's no such thing as over reporting when it comes to these cyber crimes, because the more information that they have, the faster they can work through it and, squash anything. So that's kind of it that I have for you on the cyber. Did I satisfy you guys' needs there, Karush or Tiffany?
Thank you. Yes, great
Okay.
information.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Annie. Tiffany, you want to talk about the inspection quickly? You're on mute.
Sorry, switching back. On inspections, we just need to be very careful and mindful as we go through the process of ordering inspections. Sometimes you'll order an inspection, you forgot you ordered it, it goes directly to your client or they send it to you. And you want to make sure that you are knowing that you received that inspection and you're looking at it, because you can't claim if something came to your email address or came to your text that you didn't look at it or you didn't have access to it. So when you're doing inspections and you're working on things, you've got to be careful of that, because if you know about it or it came to your email, you cannot claim otherwise. Plus, if you've finished with your client, they've backed out of the deal, so you have a buyer that backed out, you've relisted the property, you need to make sure that you're documenting your inspection items of what needs to be done. You can't utilize that inspection report without the buyer's permission that left the contract, but you also have an obligation to share material facts and information, even if the seller does not want to. So it's a delicate balance. And if you have issues or questions regarding it, you should reach out to your broker in charge before you take the next steps of having conversations with new buyers agents. Is there anything I did not add, Karush, that you wanted me to touch on there?
No, you covered it. We actually had a case where a home inspection was ordered by one of our brokers before listing the property, and there were items on the inspection report that needed immediate attention. So the agreement was to list the property at a later point. Making long story short, this agent did not go back to list because the owner changed their mind. The property was listed about 1 year later. And then this time, one of the same agent, one of our brokers, the same agent put that property under contract for a buyer client. And, this is a really complicated case, but I share with you, the new owners found the copy of the old inspection in one of the cabinets, and it had the agent's name on it. And came back on executive, and the real estate commission was not happy. And so we had a lot of conversations. The agent did not have any recollection of getting that inspection copy. And it's like, hey, it was 1 year ago. And the real estate commission, they thought different. When you are named on that inspection report, when you receive a copy of that on your email, you can't say, oh, I didn't see it, so it doesn't exist. On that inspection report, there were some water damages, water issues, and things that they were definitely material, and the agent did not look at that report. So when it comes to the second transaction, and now he was representing a buyer, the real estate commission, they had a huge problem with that. And so we had to basically make a payment to settle the case with that new homeowner, and the agent had to take some additional education to basically keep their license. So just as Tiffany said, if you're getting an inspection ordered and your inspection company typically sends you a copy of it, make sure you take time to read it, look at it. It doesn't mean that whether you're going to list that property or not. You may end up taking a buyer to that property. As a real estate broker, you are required to disclose any information that was available to you, and if it's material. So just want to share that. It was actually a real case with this company.
Thank you very much, Karush. And our next topic is escrow funds and disbursement. Oftentimes, we have situations where we've got earnest money deposits and they need to come back out of our escrow account. And everyone always questions how to do that or what we need to do. So we thought we'd walk through the process. Karush, do you want to talk about the company policy, or do you want me to continue on here?
Well, I can talk about the company policy in general. We want both parties' signature and release to disperse funds. This is RE/MAX executive policy. And I can tell you with confidence, most escrow agents, attorneys in this town, they have the same policy. They either have that escrow agreement signed ahead of time, or they want both parties to sign and agree on the disbursement before they release funds. So that's our company policy in general. Now, escrow funds are handled differently in North Carolina and South Carolina. So I'll talk about North Carolina piece. And Tiffany, since you've had the pleasure to show up to the court a couple of times, I'll let you talk about the procedure in South Carolina. But in North Carolina, the way that we typically handle disputed funds, if there's a termination and the parties don't agree to release the funds for whatever reason, somebody is unreasonable or they're just disputed or something, we typically give them reasonable time, maybe about 3 to 4 weeks to come to terms. And we have an option after the end of that term to notify the parties and let them know that we want to send the fees to the court. We can choose to keep the money in our escrow, but also in North Carolina, the state gives us the option to send the money to the court. So we typically don't want to keep these funds in our account for more than 30, 40 days, not knowing how the parties are going to decide. So depending on the case, between 30 days to 60 days after the termination, if there's no decisions done, we send the funds to the court. We notify the parties, and then we file that with the clerk of court in the county where the property is. So we always look at the property address. If it's a Union County property, we send it to the Union County court. Once the funds are received by the court in North Carolina, the court is going to schedule a hearing. They're going to send a court date to the parties. And so this part, I can just share with you, full disclosure, this is just based on experience. Again, these rules can change. Typically, the party that doesn't show up to the hearing, if they don't try to reschedule and they don't have a legitimate reason, that party loses the case. The other party gets the money and they walk out. If they can't attend, they have to get in touch with the court. They have to reschedule, make sure that they appear or they have their attorney there. And if nobody shows up, then the court has the option to send the funds to the state, and they're going to basically follow the same process as cheating the money. It goes to the state of North Carolina. So that's how we handle it in North Carolina as far as disputed funds. But again, if somebody is terminating contract within due diligence, and for whatever reason, one of the parties is not willing to sign that release, it doesn't mean that automatically your escrow agent is going to give the money to the party that should get the fund. We want both parties' signature because our position is we do not want to take, we don't want to transfer legal paperwork. We do not want to make a decision. We want the court to make that decision. One thing that I would say, my suggestion for all of you guys on this call, if you have clients that are, for some reason, they're just bitter in the transaction. They know that they don't own the money because the other party canceled within due diligence, they're in right of receiving the funds, but you're potentially working with a client that is not reasonable. They're just upset. And they say, I'm not going to sign this release. You have to be careful about giving anybody legal advice, but you can share with them as a professional. This is something we've already talked to the commission. They're fine with us to share this. You can share with them that based on our experience, the other party may take this case to the court, and if you lose the case, not only you have to pay that funds, the earnest money, or release the funds, you may be liable for court fees and other expenses. That make people think twice. If you tell them, hey, you may want to talk to your attorney or get legal advice. This is based on my experience. These guys canceled or terminated the contract within due diligence. So if you don't sign this release, just understand that they can go to court, they can hire an attorney, or just file a small claim, and they can claim not only the funds, also the time lost, the court expenses and other expenses. Again, fine line. We don't want to give anybody legal advice, but this is something that we are allowed to share our experience based on what we are seeing, and there is truth to that. So if a party, for whatever reason, they're just disgruntled, they don't want to sign the release, and so the party who should get the funds has to go to court. They can file for not only the actual amount, but their potential loss of income for that day that they go to the court and all the other expenses. So that's the process in North Carolina. Tony, if you want to go over South Carolina.
Sure. In South Carolina, it's a little bit different. Oftentimes, people submitting Form 313, and 313 is unilateral termination, but it has nothing to do with the release of the earnest money or any other funds. So you need Form 518 to do that. And once that form is done, we can sign off on releasing the money. But if it's not done, or it's checked that they want to not compromise and go to court over the situation, what ends up happening internally is we've actually got to file suit, an interpleader suit against both parties. So we're filing suit against our client and the other client in order to figure out where that money goes. And they have to go to the court, and a judge will ultimately decide who gets the money and how it's dispersed before anything else can transpire or we can release any of the funds. But the interpleader process does cost money. And so in South Carolina, if you put blank, or if you put $90 or $120 on the form where it says how much money is the escrow agent allowed to hold out if an issue occurs, that's really not enough for that, because it costs $90 to $120 if you're going down to the county and you have to go to the specific county to do it. And so we've got time involved in that. So Byron King has suggested you should have a number closer to 500 there. So please don't put 0, because the cost will be on you. Think about that. If you're not sure what I'm talking about in South Carolina, reach out to me personally. But relative to that number, you need to have a number in there so that we can actually file, because it costs to file at the county. Then when you look at the process all internally, what happens at RE/MAX Executive when we're going to disperse funds? Well, our accounting department is involved, and we're always going to return things certified mail to the US Postal Service. We do not FedEx, we do not do any overnight. We do certified so that we can get a signed receipt. And if for some reason that is not satisfactory to you, you need to let everyone know ahead of time so that they can then take the proper steps for you to pick up that check to deliver it directly to your client. We typically will wait no more than 30 days. Our admins will start looking at files that were drawn to make sure we know how to handle the earnest money. So if you have an admin reaching out to you or accounting reaching out to you, please respond quickly so that we can resolve any issues relative to escrow funds and get those released as quick as possible to our clients. Now that we're finished talking about escrow funds and disbursements, we are going to move on and chat with Daniel Peterson. As I mentioned earlier, he is our legal counsel. He's a partner with Parker Poe, and he represents us in the majority of legal claims. We do go to Travelers E&O, and they typically are referring us out to Daniel Peterson and his firm to handle the majority of the cases that we have to work through each year. Daniel, I believe you're back.
I am. I'm here.
Thank you for joining us today. And the top 5 sources of complaints is where we wanted to take the discussion with you today, so that agents know what to look out for, to be cautious of, and kind of what we see in and out on a daily basis or year in, year out here at RE/MAX Executive working with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tiffany and Karush, for having me and for coordinating this. I'm always glad to work with you all across the company. The agents are top flight, and I'm really grateful to work with y'all and continue to do so. So the biggest source, and it's been especially since kind of the COVID crisis and then moving on, and I actually think it has to do more with the hot housing market more than anything, is kind of what I call the cases of the disappointed buyers. Is the far and away the top source of complaint that I'm seeing a lot of, and kind of a step back. Well, I've got a kind of captive audience here. Is, you know, obviously if you're named in a commission complaint in North or South Carolina, if you're named in a lawsuit, or if you receive a subpoena, any kind of legal process, that doesn't mean you did something wrong. And that particularly seems to be true when we're getting these complaints from, again, what I call the cases of the disappointed buyers. The crucial thing is to report it up your chain, get it to Travelers, get it to us so we can assess the situation and advise you and the company appropriately. A lot of the stuff we're seeing, and again, I think that's because some folks are seeking out their own legal counsel throughout again, I've seen an uptick in that too. Where it's not just attorneys, or excuse me, where it's not just individuals making complaints, it's individuals through attorneys or with attorney ghostwriters sometimes in an effort to collect information before they, take other legal action, is that, they try to, there's an attempt sometimes to go after things that are hard to disprove. Now, they ought to have the burden of proof, right, as they would in any sort of lawsuit. And we heard about it a little earlier, but things like anything related to moisture has been a hot topic recently. And, a lot of times you guys are in a difficult situation. A lot of times, just like attorneys are, where people assume your expertise and your subject matter means that you're also omniscient and omnipotent when it comes to the houses you're showing, or the houses you're taking clients to see, and the houses you're listing. And we know that's not true. So a lot of times what we're seeing is kind of a buyer's remorse for the house, maybe because things move so fluidly in the marketplace right now. And we've got all these great instantaneous communication devices. People, oh, I really want this house. They get that emotional attachment, and here we are. Just make sure, again, and you all know this, and again, working with y'all, generally speaking, everybody does a great job with this. Walk them through the process as we just heard. Keep your objectivity too, and make sure they know that they've got a champion in you, but also someone that is gonna help them temper that emotion. That's not really that's just kind of a good risk management strategy in general, because then what happens is the buyer's upset and they start blaming people, and it may or may not have been your client. It may have been you may have been the listing agent. And again, as we just heard from Karush, an example of, we had an inspection ordered a year prior. It sat in a drawer, so to speak, in an email box. And you're unfortunately charged with that knowledge a lot of times. And even if you're not, and one of the questions I get a lot from real estate agents in these sort of, again, kind of disappointed buyers cases is, how is this my problem? How was I supposed to do anything about this? Which is why one of my points today is to say, look, that doesn't, just because there's a complaint, as you well know, doesn't mean it's accurate. You already know that, but it doesn't mean that they've got a merit, a claim with merit to it. But of course, then there's the other side of it too, is that's why candor, if you're talking to me, if you're talking to any attorney that's assigned the matter to defend it, is crucial out front, because that then allows us to assess it and advise appropriately and chart the course as best we can based on the facts that we know. I'm seeing less on the flip side, I'm seeing less complaints with, kind of the disappointed seller, but that's been out there a few times. That's this feeling that because the market's so good, or perceived to be so good, that they got less than they should have. They bit too quickly or something like that. And that, again, usually comes with this allegation that, you weren't my champion, you weren't my fiduciary. And a bit of kind of broad advice too is to say, if you hear a word like fiduciary, that's usually a good idea to, report up if you hear that kind of comment directed at you, because that's not something I find most people that haven't done some sort of legal research or in real estate business generally would use STL. So, but in any event, I see that less with the disappointed sellers, but there's been a couple that have been out there, which then leads me to kind of my broader second source of complaints within, real estate commission, and then also civil process. And that's the kind of rapid fire documentation. Try to remember to not only memorialize offers, even if you're passing them along verbally, but then to retain those communications. Again, we all live in a world that is frenetic. We've got computers attached to our hip. It's easy. It's just as easy to make a phone call, hooked up to your Bluetooth speaker and communicate something to your client to get that information as quick as possible to them. And that's a great instinct. My, again, kind of risk management guarded, that you want me to be thinking of for you is try to memorialize those communications, even if it's in a private, diary notation format. But certainly it's helpful if you communicate it directly to your client. Because it's kind of irrelevant whether you think the relationship between your client and you is solid and amicable. If something goes south, they're going to come back to you, right? So I think that's assume things. It's hard to be cynical, but assume things could go south, and that's why it's important to capture these rapid fire documentations, text messages, and then preserving them too. As I, again, earlier in the hour, I heard some great information about encryption and cybersecurity with relation to that. That has the helpful side effect of also preventing or at least ameliorating potential legal claims, because it's hard to say something didn't get communicated when you've got it in writing, or again, at a minimum, when you've got something that you wrote at the time and said, hey, to myself, for the file, memo to file, I talked to this person about this and it's in there. And then a guy like me, a person like me can turn around and say, did you write this on this date? Did you write this at the time? Yes. And that helps refresh your recollection. Related to that is I'm seeing some complaints about a lack of communication. Don't make assumptions about what your client will or will not, find feasible with regard to like offers, certainly, or anything like that. Again, even though your clients and you're doing your best by them, if something goes awry, they're going to point back to you. So it's a lack of communication is also something that can be cured by just quick documentation. And again, going to my related point, it's often not even a lack of communication, it's an alleged lack of communication, right? So it's not that the agent didn't communicate, it's that we can't prove that they communicated. And it's a he said, she said sort of situation. So that's another kind of point of emphasis I'm seeing is, make sure you've got a complete file and make sure you're preserving that file. And remember, according to, the North Carolina Commission rules, is basically the transaction file is, as I like to say to everybody, kind of everything, right? So it's not just the typical disclosure forms or anything like that. It's the communications. So keep those handy. It helps you because, again, the allegations so often are meritless. It's just so much easier when we can reconstruct that factual timeline. The fourth thing that is kind of a source of complaints that I'm seeing is assumptions sometimes or unverified items, either in the MLS sheet or otherwise communicated. And I filed this one really under the it's not fair kind of condition thing. Again, just because somebody makes a complaint doesn't mean you're responsible for it, but it does create a lot of unnecessary time and expense of your time when you do get a complaint, and I understand that. But something like, the status of a waterproof basement, for instance, that doesn't seem like something a listing agent who, if you've got a client that told you, look, the basement's been waterproofed, it was waterproofed, 7 years ago, and we've not had any moisture issues. And again, going back to that topic I mentioned before, I've seen a lot of this stuff is moisture related. And my cynical theory is that those are often harder to prove when they happened. And that's why we're seeing those allegations more often these days. But again, going back to kind of stuff in the MLS, just make sure you're going through if you're a listing agent, going through and saying, okay, well, what's the basis of this? What's the basis of this? And then stepping back to our previous point and making sure you're documenting those conversations and those sources. You're not expected to be perfect. Okay, the law does not expect perfection. What it expects is reasonability. So you always want to be able to look back at your file and say, look, what I did was reasonable. And that's easier said than done a lot. You guys are busy professionals, and it's not easy to just keep the cleanest file in the world. But I really can tell you from several personal experiences working with real estate agents, it's the folks that have the cleanest files that we're often running earlier than the folks that we've got to kind of cobble together a timeline, and that's exceedingly helpful. And again, it's a no judgment thing from me. It's not my job to do that. It's just, I'm just telling you, it is easier to construct a timeline when things are very well documented. And so again, just look out for assumptions, in the MLS, even if it's from a previous listing, and you should have no business. It doesn't seem objectionable, but particularly with anything that could end up going back to moisture or water. That seems to be the complaint du jour these days, at least from what I've seen, roof leaks, etc., anything to do with moisture. So, and then finally, as far as sources of complaints, and then I will ask if I could just have a couple minutes to indulge me on a related topic, is I've seen an increase in attorneys for your clients. So not real estate attorneys, like folks like me, but on the other side of what we call the V, plaintiff's attorneys, if you will, or just somebody representing your client if a deal goes south or they're unsatisfied, or you're, even if you don't think they're unsatisfied with your work, even if they've told you they're not unsatisfied with your work, but hey, could you talk to my attorney about this offer that got, blown up by this other person's misdeeds? Please do not talk with the other person's attorney without reporting up to management first. And then, again, if it's appropriate, that they'll approach me or somebody, or, an attorney about doing that. That's been a source of a couple of complaints and other various legal processes, again, including threatened litigation. And the old adage, good deeds don't go unpunished, really is true here, okay? Even if the client's announced intention, the attorney's announced intention is friendly, and we're just trying to figure out what happened here, it is imperative that I don't want to come off so cynical, but it's kind of where we are. Please report up to management, even if they're your best friends. The client and the attorney are your best friends. Go to Tiffany Karush, someone in your management team, before you talk to them about the situation. Okay, and I hate to repeat myself a lot, but this applies even if you cannot conceive of a way you could be liable for anything. And again, it is not what it's to quote the movie A Few Good Men from the 80s. This isn't about what I can say, but what I can prove. Well, the reverse is true here. It's about what they say that costs you all your time and stress and energy in responding to these things. It's not what they can prove. It will end up being what they can prove, but attorneys are trained in trying to get the answer they want rather than the answer that is your truth, so to speak. So you think you're just giving them the facts, especially if it's a verbal communication, that's going to get turned on you. Okay. And I'm not speaking hypothetically. I've seen it happen multiple times, again, with an uptick since COVID happened. And I can't explain the two being correlated, but I've seen that come up a lot. And so related to that, kind of my, again, risk management pitch here that I know you've probably heard already, but again, subpoenas, commission complaints, where we started on this. Please, again, report them up to your management team, get them out to travelers. Subpoenas, even if it's just your transaction file, we just want your file from this one transaction. It has nothing to do to you. a subpoena means you're just a witness, not a party. Well, there's a lot of factors that go into that assessment. And that includes, an attorney looking at this and saying, okay, what curveball are they trying to get at something? Or are they really just looking for the information? That usually involves me picking up the phone and saying, hey, Attorney X, what's the deal? What are you looking for here? Help me help you. So to determine whether they're really just looking for the documents to fill in some gaps in whatever case is going on, or executory, administration of an estate or something like that, or if they're looking for somebody to blame. If frankly, they're looking for a company to blame that they think they can squeeze some dollars out of. So even if it looks as asinine as can be, and even if you can't think of anything that you could possibly be criticized of, subpoena commission complaints, please report up. And then one other note, kind of related to that, but I don't think gets as much press, but is in fact related to some of the cyber security issues that was discussed earlier in the hour, are preservation letters. That's another thing that if you get what we call sometimes a litigation hold letter or preservation letter, and that usually comes, doesn't have to, it usually comes in the form of something from an attorney with a letterhead on it that says, preserve all your documents related to this transaction. This is not currently a legal dispute, but it could be. You could be a party to that dispute. You might just be a witness. The preservation letters are sent out a lot, and I've seen them sent to RE/MAX or to individual agents. In the event you get one sent to you, don't assume RE/MAX, the company got one as well. Again, report up, because it's imperative we start those processes that RE/MAX and again, the attorney on your side starts that process of preservation. The one thing you do want to do though is, preserve everything. Well, that's usually a more, a more complex conversation than it might seem at first, but definitely make sure you don't go in and delete anything. And even if anything remotely related to the subject matter they're asking about, because let me tell you one thing, if you try to, even if it seems benign or embarrassing or anything like that, when you delete something, it's never really deleted. And keep that as a general rule of thumb. There are these forensic IT guys, there's something else, and it's intrusive and uncomfortable if we have to say, Agent X, did delete this, it did have some text messages, but just they got deleted, and well, okay, then I want their full phone and I want it imaged, and my, the other attorney's associates are going to go through it or something like that. We don't want you in a position like that. So I appreciate your indulgence on that. I know it was a little off topic, but something that I just want to make sure I touch base on. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. Hope I didn't move too fast.
Great, thank you, Daniel. So there were 3 questions in the chat. The first one is, so if you are a listing agent and you have a buyer's agent representing an investor who's never seen the house, what is the best way for our listing agent to protect themselves should the investor come back and say, I hate this house, and take it out on the agents involved?
There's really no real magic to it, unfortunately. Again, it's not really a situation where you can stop them from making the allegation. It's just in those situations in particular, you want, the maximum documentation as possible. You want, I really, with that specific situation, to me, I wouldn't decline to have a phone conversation. Obviously, that's not customer service or anything like that, but you would really want to do most of your communications in writing. Make sure that you've got kind of, look, you're not seeing this. This is kind of sight unseen. Make sure you're documenting that they're electing to not come see the house. Again, you can't stop an allegation, but what you can do is document against it. This is the best way I can say that.
Mm-hmm. The second question is, do you have any concerns for future issues with all of the as-is sales going on, where people waive home inspections and repairs? Do you see any lawsuits coming from that down the line?
So the most common suits we get in general, or the most common causes of action we get in lawsuits in general are, breach of fiduciary duty and then this negligent misrepresentation. So I think, again, as long as it's as well documented, there's less risk, but I do think that there is probably an uptick in the buyer's remorse issue. And I'm not saying there's any merit to it. And it is just kind of a function of the marketplace too. But that's why, again, being very particular about making sure you're using the right forms and using the right contracts in those situations is imperative. And what disclosures you do have to still are made in writing and made often. So.
Got it. And then the last question is, before an agent speaks to a client's attorney, is there a hold harmless agreement that they could have the attorney sign?
So the answer is yes, but they won't sign it. And you might as well then invite me along for the, you might as well invite me along for the conversation at that point anyway. Yes, but their red flags will go up then. Whereas I think, honestly, if you just report up and then it's you can blame it on the attorney, the company attorney kind of thing. That I would, but we've got this attorney that wants to talk to you kind of thing first. And I may, facilitate a conversation, but it's just going to depend on the facts. So.
Got it. Thank you. Well, that's all of the questions that were in the chat. Does anyone have anything else for Daniel? I guess not. Okay. Well, thank you for being here with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Again, keep up the good work, everybody. It's really a joy to get to work.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Have a good afternoon. We appreciate your time. Okay, so we are going to move on now. And our next topic is how to diffuse a tense situation or tense situations in negotiations. And Debbie Maxwell is going to join me now because she's one of the best at this. And I'm sure we have plenty in our firm that are really good at diffusing situations. So if you have any suggestions, throw them in the chat. Hi, Debbie.
Hey there. Sorry about my little horn, but when I get a message, it goes off.
Well, it announced you arriving, so you are
Sorry.
here and ready to go. So before we put this together, Debbie and I started talking a little bit about how do we diffuse situations? What do we do to not get to the point where we have to use our E&O insurance and to where clients are upset or mad? And oftentimes it's small things or little things you can do along the way personally to help with this. Debbie, we put together a list and I think you can probably see it on the screen. Do you want to talk a little bit about each of the items and kind of your insight on how we came up with those?
Sure. I think before you speak, I think, Karush and I actually had a conversation about this yesterday, but you really do sometimes have to stop and, change your disposition, I guess, is the easiest way. There are a lot of people that will just push every button you have, and instead of being the one that blows up, be the one that just kind of tones down the conversation. As I used to talk to my kids, I used to use my library voice to get them to kind of, calm down, and that is exactly what I do with adults. But I think another thing too, I think we set the tone for the transaction. So we're having a conversation and the other agent is all upset, and I often feel that the agent is letting their client create the tone, and that's part of our job, I feel, is to make everybody kind of calm, and things just go better when you think before you speak, you think before you share, and when you're the calm one, it can easily diffuse the situation. And of course, think win-win. I've had a couple of debates about that. They think, I'm representing my client, da 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 da. Well, there's always a happy medium that your clients will go to. So, I always go to the other agent, and my favorite thing to say to them, and those of you who have worked with me will know, I say, do your magic, and get your client to get to that point, and that makes them feel good when they can come back and say, hey, I got it done, and so it is a win-win, and just don't get emotional unless you're happy.
That is so true, Debbie. I think that do your magic is a wonderful way to connect with the other agent and get them on board for that win-win scenario. And remaining calm, we all try to do it. Some of us do a better job than others, probably. And sometimes what comes out of one's mouth, you wish you could just pull it all back in after you've said it, or after you've hit send to send the response directly from the other agent to your client. That can backfire pretty quickly with getting your side very hot. So it's not only what's coming out of your mouth, but it's what's coming across from your text, what's coming across from your email, and making sure you're not just hitting send and forcing information back and forth that maybe should be presented in a different manner. We're there to represent the best interest of our clients, and sometimes stating exactly what they put in content in a heated moment back to the other side isn't the best scenario to help them win what they're looking to win. So think text tone sounds like. I know I'm busy, but take a second and reread what you wrote. Because sometimes, even though I try to be the kindest and nicest person going back and forth, I look at what I wrote, it's like, that seems a little curt because I didn't say hello or thank you or good morning. I just got straight to the point. Sometimes you need to think about how the other person's going to perceive what you're sending. And that perception means a whole lot to the other side, whether it's intended or not. And in today's fast-paced text, email, call, send a voice message, it can get misconstrued pretty quickly, and it can end up causing your client dollars or a deal. So think about what you're doing as you're moving through the day, because the last thing you want to do is have a buyer go away or a seller go away, be upset with the transaction, and it could have been something that we could have reasonably done to make a difference. And I love that was what I did reasonable, that Daniel Peterson said, because ultimately we could be staring down the eye of a lawsuit and wondering, was that reasonable? And when you look back on it, you want to make sure you like it was reasonable.
That's true. And I also, one of the things that I've actually had to deal with before with my clients, the other agent will say, well, my buyer said this, this, and this, and please let your clients know that they're not happy about this, this, or this. Am I going to go to my clients and say those buyers aren't happy? Oh, no. I want them to not have a care in the world during this transaction. It's tough enough to move, but you don't need to allow the other side to create drama in their lives, So I feel like that's another thing that we do is we buffer these things. They're not real facts that we're not sharing. They are just emotional things that we're not sharing. And I choose to try to do, make my clients as happy as possible all the time. So
that is so true. I can't tell you how many times at the end of a transaction, a client has said, are you sure you're not a therapist? Because oftentimes you feel like you're the family therapist and you're working through an issue with someone, even though you don't have the license or title. And we certainly aren't practicing mental health, but oftentimes it's part of your job to make sure you're helping them through the process. They hired you because you're their expert advisor. You're guiding them and counseling them in one of the biggest transactions of their lifetime for the majority of our clients. And you want to make sure that everyone feels good, even in tense situations or difficult times, or could be something that pops up that they didn't expect, but it's how you diffuse it and how you handle it and not get on the hot end of it or overly emotional about it is going to have them feeling a lot better about what you've just said.
Well, and talking to the other agent, and I really have never met an agent that I couldn't talk to like this and just say, you know, hey, what can we do to fix this? Let's you and I fix this. You know, what do we need to do? And they're always responsive, and we get it done. It just is when you just kind of stop and just look at the big picture and making, like you said, a win-win. It's so easy to do. You just it's the be kind thing, you know. It's ridiculous, but that's how simple it is.
That is definitely true, Debbie. I appreciate you taking time to share this, because as we're talking about risk management and E&O, everyone's like, oh my God, what's going to happen? They're probably all freaking out going, what do my files look like? Do I have the cleanest files? Do I have the best files out there? There's going to be a file that's not clean, that's not perfect. You just need to do what you can do to make sure you're being reasonable at the time and that you've got the documentation. And when we send out information from these meetings, one of the things we're going to do is help you understand how to better get some of this information into SkySlope. Karen Hull, a couple of years ago, shared that she easily pushes her text from her cell phone into SkySlope, and how you make sure your emails go into SkySlope so that you have a more concise file there and you're not looking for things all over the place. And so we'll show some demonstrations on how to do that as we share more information after today's call. But Debbie, thank you for stepping in and talking about how to diffuse a tense situation. Again, think before you speak, think before you share, be the calm one, think when, and don't get emotional. Those are the takeaways from that.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Thank you, Debbie. So there are a couple of things that we're going to go through, and then we're going to talk about what do I do if I get a letter? What do I do if I get a subpoena? But yesterday, Sandy McAlpine made a great point, and the professional services disclosure is out there in North Carolina for a reason. And when you're looking at the professional services disclosure form, and I'm sorry, I have a screen to my right, so I'm looking to my right. This form can protect you from so much more than you ever can think of. And it also is something gives you a tool to talk to your clients about things. Yesterday, someone mentioned you should be offering up several inspectors and several lenders and several of everything you're doing. This form actually says, hey, I'm going to be recommending someone as a professional here, but I'm not being held responsible or liable for exactly what they do. You have the right to waive it or select it, and we're going to mark who ordered it here. So I've got the professional services disclosure and election form set up, and Byron King noted that in South Carolina it should be coming soon. But right now, this form basically, if you look down the list, it's crazy all the different options that are on it. So from services, you've got accountants, CPAs, and tax advisors. You've got appraisal, which we don't necessarily order. You've got the attorney. You've got the home warranty. And inspections, they've got it down to the home inspection, HVAC inspection, pool and spa, radon, septic, well and water quality, wood pest infestations, the re-inspections. And then you've got more over here. You've got insurance for property and flood, the National Flood Insurance Program, the mortgage loan, and the survey. Those are all things that if you're making recommendations, this form can offer some protection and shelter for you. So that gives you an opportunity to talk to your clients about it on the front end. I wouldn't have them sign all of this on the back end. And I can say for one that I should be utilizing this form more. And I think that you should consider utilizing it more as well. There were some key points on it that I just wanted to talk about since we talked about surveys. And I hear someone, it says, you keep freezing up. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So note regarding surveys. So one of the things we talked about yesterday, and Byron King, I think, scared us all, was the survey and using a past survey. Well, when your client's purchasing a property, they're purchasing one of the biggest investments of their life. What if they want to put a pool in the backyard? Or for heaven's sake, they're looking in the backyard and they say, do you think it goes to about that tree line? And as an agent, you say, well, probably, that makes sense. Well, then the next thing you know, you're getting a letter from the attorney saying it didn't go to that tree line. And a survey can clearly tell you where it is, and it's a third party that is doing precisely that. And so I put up the note that is actually in the professional services disclosure here that you can read. I'm not going to read it to you, but things to think about. If they want to put a pool in there in the future, they want to put a fence up, or what if the people that are currently there put the fence in the wrong part of the property? I don't know if you've ever had this happen, but I had someone that back to HOA, and he was part of the building team that developed the community, and he added 10 feet with his fence. Whose problem is that if you don't get a survey? It's your buyer's problem. So you need to make sure that you're telling them that they should have a survey. And if they don't want a survey, get them to sign off on this disclosure that they didn't want one. And then radon and other environmental quality pieces, that's something that we should always be mentioning and bringing up. CE, a couple of years ago, maybe 3 or 4, talked about radon. It's odorless, it can't smell. Don't say just because it's not a basement, you shouldn't get a radon test, because there's clear indication, and I've had plenty of slabs that had radon, that if it's important to your client, they should have it tested. And you as a professional should be hearing the risk and what's involved. And there's great information and paraphernalia that you can put into your presentations if that's important. And something you don't have today, let me know and I can pull a few pieces for you. And then the bottom line was that other important information. It's basically just for expertise. I'm seeing a few people.
Tiffany, you're freezing up.
I am going to keep going. Can everyone hear me? Okay. So yesterday we also talked about personal deals, and Katie, our E&O specialist, mentioned a few things, and I just wanted to bring this back up because Karush and I talked about it, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page. If you or your family member have 25% or more ownership interests and you represent yourself or your family member, you are not covered by E&O insurance for claims. And that's not just with RE/MAX Executive. If Travelers Insurance doesn't offer it, that pretty much means no one is offering it. And so we need to be very careful here. You might want to team up with another agent in your office and have them represent you in the transaction and offer to do the same for them. I was talking to Karush earlier, and he said that he has not represented himself since he became a RE/MAX executive agent in leadership here. And he said part of it was that he just wanted to make sure someone else was not getting through the deal as a professional. So if you are representing yourself or a family member that owns more than 25%, you've got to realize that there's not coverage. If you have questions about that, reach out to myself, reach out to Karush, and we can talk you through that. But don't believe it's going to be different anywhere else you go. It's an exclusion. Now, there are some components. If it's less than 25%, then you've got to have, like we talked about yesterday, that property disclosure signed, a home warranty offered, and you've got to make sure you're using the local and state forms. And you need to make sure that you're making your broker in charge aware of what you're doing prior to doing it, please. So are there any questions on the personal property piece or anything else before I move on to how to file an E&O claim? And we start rolling this towards the finish.
Yep, so there was one question in the chat. Does RE/MAX Executive have a form for buyers to sign waiving survey? And also, attorneys no longer order surveys for the most part, and getting a survey quickly is nearly impossible.
Yes. So surveys, if there's an encroachment or an issue, you do need to have a survey to go out. We would use a professional services and disclosure form. If you're in South Carolina, there should be a form coming soon, and I will talk to Karush about coming up with something that might help you there, but I would have it in writing regardless of whether you have a form or not. Send an email, say, do you want a survey? question answered is no, I do not want a survey. You've got it in writing right there. But I wouldn't just say, do you want a survey? I would explain a little bit more and have it set up to where they know why they should have a survey, not just do you want a survey, but these are the reasons why you should contemplate a survey. When you're buying a house and you're spending as much as you are on purchasing a house and that investment, spending the extra money on the inspection and on the survey and the things you need to know everything about that property is important, and you wouldn't advise someone else not to do so. Okay. Anything else, Haley?
In the meantime, can we use the NC form for South Carolina?
I have actually done that in the past to show clients yes or no and use the check boxes so that I had a way to have them go down the list, and it was a comprehensive list. And again, when we do a follow-up email from this, I'll share anything that we can that can help you with that if you're in South Carolina and need something in the meantime.
Okay, and that's it for the questions.
Okay, so as we're rolling into the final pieces, we've been talking about E&O. What happens if I get a letter? What happens if I get a yellow envelope? What happens when something happens? Well, not everything's going to require E&O. So that's why we want you to think about it. So if someone says, I'm going to sue you, if someone says, I want X dollars right now, or I demand you do this immediately, or I'm contacting my attorney, that's probably time that you start contacting your broker in charge. Don't just let it ride out. Don't think I've been doing this a million years. I'll diffuse it. I'll figure this out. Let your broker in charge know there's been an issue and share it. Now, how do we share it and how do we get that process started to figure out how we're going to help you, how we're going to protect you, and what's in your best interest? So how we handle an E&O matter. Number one, contact your broker in charge. And if for some reason you cannot get a hold of your broker in charge, contact myself or contact Karush, and we will get the ball rolling and make sure we connect and roll back in your broker in charge. Second, write a summary. Don't write a book. Don't put every detail in the world in there. It's much easier for us to determine how to help you if we have bullet points that are concise and to the point and a quick summary. Leave the book to another day. We just need to know the details. And by the time you write the book and reread it 5 times, we probably could have helped you and figured out what needs to happen. Third, management review. We're going to look at it and decide, does this go to E&O, or is there some way we can help you solve this problem without getting our E&O involved? The next component is we're going to help you take action, whether it's getting your broker in charge to reach out to the other party or giving you advice on how to connect and solve the issue, or contacting Katie Marsh and going through the claims process. There's a step-by-step process. So we don't want you reaching out to Katie Marsh on your own. We don't want you reaching out to Annie Neal on your own or Daniel Peterson. If that's going to happen, it will be Karush, Megan, or myself or your broker in charge that does that. But Karush and a leadership team is responsible for making sure that we are putting forth the claims and we're documenting them. So we want to make sure that we have everything that you know documented. So make sure you're connecting with us, you're giving us that summary, and you're not going out and just getting your own legal counsel to solve an issue. Make sure that you get us involved and that we are able to walk through the process with you, because within our accounting department and our management side, we do have a documentation process where we're keeping track of everything and project managing where we are on each case. And we're a large group. And so even though I'd hate to say we don't have any cases, we'll always have something going on. And we want to make sure that we're providing the best protection to you or to the firm in some cases to make sure that we're all on the same page. Any questions regarding E&O or anything that we've talked about that I might be able to quickly answer here? I'm always available otherwise, but it's 2:47, and believe it or not, we might be able to wrap up a little bit early. Any other questions?
So I have a question. This is about Earnest. What are the liabilities for agents now that some are using the Earnest app? And what security measures do they have in place?
It is my understanding after talking to Karush about Earnest and talking to other cybersecurity professionals about Earnest, they use the top encryption methods available as high as banks do in terms of transfer of money. So they are taking on that responsibility or liability as long as you're utilizing it properly. And it's safe to utilize Earnest at this point. So I would not be concerned about utilizing that technology based on what I know regarding the encryption process.
Alrighty. Who is responsible for the $5,000 deductible?
We talked a little bit about reasons why the $5,000 deductible would be waived earlier in the presentation yesterday. And if it doesn't meet those standards, it's typically going to be the agent that's responsible for the $5,000.
So if someone got their South Carolina license in 2021, does she need to get the ethics by the end of the year?
She needs to go onto the National Association of Realtors website and double check to see if it says she's met her ethics obligations for the year. You can see the minute you sign on with your NERDS number.
And when are the fingerprints due for South Carolina?
So if you were due this year for your license, so in 2021, if you had to renew your license, you must have your fingerprints done by the end of this year. If you are due to have your fingerprints done for 2022, because that's when you renew your license in South Carolina on that every other year, as of right now, you need to have them done. I would go ahead and start getting them done because you're gonna have to have them done before they will renew your license. And I will tell you that South Carolina has not come up with a great plan to tell you they actually got your fingerprints. As of right now, I don't think you can call and confirm it. If they don't have them, they're going to let you know and there's going to be an issue. So getting it done sooner than later is important. And there are Identigo sites around that you can go and you can easily get those fingerprints done and processed. And if you don't have your TSA pre-check, even though it's not real estate related, you can easily get that done while you're there. So make sure you've got those documents handy.
And for those who need fingerprints, is it just a one-time thing or do they have to go back every few years to do it?
As South Carolina continues to roll out this plan and put a more proper process around it, I'm sure we'll have to renew it again at some point. But getting everyone's fingerprints in the system right now is the ultimate goal for South Carolina, but there will be further review requirements as we move forward, I'm sure.
Got it. That's all that I've seen in the chat. Oh, well, earlier, so there's one more. In
There
the
was-
event in the event a buyer backs out of a purchase agreement due to inspections, since agents can't share the report, how do they share the issues, especially if sellers are unwilling and disagree on the issues?
You need to take and dissect information out of the report because you have access to it if you do, and share information. And if there is a damaged bandsaw in the crawl space or truss is broken in the attic, you need to say that that's happening and share that information if your clients didn't fix it. Some things could be nail pops or something like that, which isn't necessarily material. It's a cosmetic piece, but if it's material, don't find yourself being negligent because you're trying to keep in good graces with your seller. Because oftentimes sellers will say, oh, we don't have to share that, do we? Well, yes, you do need to share things that are material facts.
I just wanted
And
to
where
add,
is,
this is
go ahead,
Cindy.
Cindy.
I wanted to add real quick. I took a CE class that said it fulfilled my ethics requirements several months ago. And when I went to the NAR website to check, it said I was not complete. So I had to send my certificate to Canopy, and then Canopy had to submit it so that I fulfilled it. So if somebody thinks that they've done it, just double check in case you haven't, and you might have to send your certificate.
That is very good advice. And a couple of other questions were, you don't have to put it in the MLS remarks, but anyone who is interested in the property before you negotiate a contract, that should be shared. And just to protect yourself, I would put it in writing, because verbal word of mouth, you might have missed something or they might have misheard something. And if you've got it in print and easy to send, then you've got it right there and you've got it documented and you probably have a clean file at the end of the day. Another thing that Scott Tony and I talked about, and he just reminded me to talk to you about. If you are going out to Facebook groups, Charlotte area realtors, any of those sites where you see agents bickering back and forth or agents talking bad about someone, as an ethics requirement, you legally should not be speaking about another real estate professional in a negative way, and appraisers fall into that category. So if you had a bad day and you thought ABC appraiser did the worst job ever, don't go say every deal ABC appraiser does is awful. That's a problem, because you can be called up to a hearing and have some pretty substantial fines. So don't find yourself going back and forth with someone or agreeing with someone that is belittling someone on social media. You need to step and be above that and higher than that. As a RE/MAX agent, we expect it, and we know that you can comply with that. But any reckless, misleading, or false statement, you don't need to make them, and you certainly don't need to support them.
So Candy wanted to clarify, some agents might be thinking about the pre-listing inspection report done for the sellers, and some might be thinking about the inspection report performed for the buyer. Does that change your answers at all?
It does not. If you have an inspection
Okay.
done, whether it's a pre-inspection or it is a buyer having an inspection and shared, you need to disclose something that a seller is not doing. And so just again, we're in North Carolina anyway, we are an as-is state unless agreed to otherwise. And so if you know of a problem, you need to disclose it. And in South Carolina, where you've got repair procedure, due diligence, or as is, if you know of a problem, you're being negligent if you're not sharing it.
What about appraisal issues if it doesn't appraise?
Well, appraisals are all relevant to the day that they actually occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just use your best judgment relative to how to respond to what that question is. And if you have questions regarding a specific appraisal problem, reach out to your broker in charge, but there are typically ways that you can handle it to where you're not saying it didn't appraise.
Mm-hmm. And Sherry asked if we all get credit for being here. Sherry, you do. I have taken your attendance. Thank you for being here. And y'all don't have to take a quiz. You get A+.
Yes, anyone who attended both days of the E&O risk management in person, you do not have to listen to it afterwards unless you just want to go back and check out a certain section. And anyone who has not been able to attend both days will have to do a short quiz at the end of listening to each of those so that we pass our E&O and risk management for the end of the year. And part of the reason that we're doing this, and we'll probably do it maybe not 4 hours a year, but to some degree each year, is that our E&O continues to go up, up, up with the litigious environment we're having today. So we want to make sure that we're protecting you as our agents and that we're looking after everyone's bottom line. So we appreciate you taking time to join us today. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Everything will be posted soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.